Well, welcome to Climate Action Week, Sydney. I'm Brent Clark from Wattblock. I'm coming from Camaragal land, and today we've got a session that I've really been looking forward to. A fireside chat with Nathan Hage from the Strata Committee at Zinc, which is on Gadigal land of the Eora people. Zinc is an apartment complex of 45 apartments in Alexandria. I first met Nathan through City of Sydney's sustainability programs back in 2017, and Zinc had already started on its energy efficiency work at that time and has continued to set the pace for residential strata building electrification retrofits. We could probably go as far as to say that Zinc has undergone the most retrofit work of any strata apartment building in Australia to electrify and decarbonise. Nathan works as a general manager of transport at Coates in his day job. He has also appeared in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, SBS, on Your Strata Property Online podcast with Amanda Farmer, in Flat Chat, and on Wattblock's YouTube channel. Zinc has won the City of Sydney Smart Green Apartments Award in 2019 and the Innovation Technology Award from the Australian Apartment Advocacy Group in 2024. So we can say that Zinc is a building which is systematic, hydromatic, and electrifying. So welcome to everyone that's joined us today. We want to talk technology, we want to talk strata, and particularly about strata committees. So Nathan, let's start with when did you first purchase your apartment at Zinc?
Thanks, Brent. It was in 2005, and can I just say that most of those interviews were done in car parks outside warehouses in various locations around Western Sydney, so it was high quality there as well.
And did you join the strata committee from day one when you bought your apartment?
No, I didn't. I was very naive. I didn't even know that such a thing existed. So it was about 2010 from memory when I joined the committee.
Right.
And most of that was because I felt guilty for one particular person who was doing the lion's share of the lifting at the time. So I just wanted to help out.
Look, that's something that we find in so many of our strata buildings. There are a couple of people that bear the weight of the building on their shoulders. And if someone like yourself can join in and offload them, it's, all power to that strata committee. So how many people were on the strata committee when you first joined?
I think it was 6 from memory. Back
Uh-huh.
in the days, a lot of grey hairs ago, so it was about 6.
And is it a case that you've sort of built up a core team on the strata committee over the last, 14 years? Or have you had people moving in and out of the strata committee in that time?
Oh, look, a little bit of both. It's been a stable committee. There's been a little bit of movement, like maybe one person every couple of years, off and on the committee. Um, mostly mostly just for their own personal demands reasons. But there's certainly been a few people that have been absolute long-term committee members.
I guess what we're trying to work out is Zinc's got something special, like a special strata committee source that a lot of our other apartment buildings would like to learn from. So, like if you've got a few people that have longevity there, I guess, if a few people have stayed the course on that committee, then maybe you're building up momentum, would you say? Or has it still
Yeah,
been, one step forward, two steps back?
there's definitely some momentum, but I think the most important thing for the special source is getting some values alignment.
Hmm.
Easier said than done because it's not, we're not recruiting for a corporate and there's not psychometric tests for it. But certainly people that have, shown interest and wanted to get involved have become involved. And those that have been on the committee for a while sort of know how we operate, and that sort of, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of our approach to what we do and how we do it, from the minutiae and the incredibly boring but necessary to the more exciting stuff.
Okay. So now, if I threw it out there that there are three archetypes that you might need on a strata committee to do the sort of electrification projects that Zinc's achieved over the years, and if I call one of them the bean counter, I call one of them the engineer or the tinkerer, and I call the other one the sustainability champion, which of those hats would you consider yourself to have been over the last decade or so at Zinc? And do you have people that fulfill those other archetypes on the committee?
Well, much as it pains me to say it out loud, I think I'd be the sustainability champion, only because I'm just shying away from the word champion, but definitely a sustainability advocate. And in terms of the other ones, absolutely, we have a bean counter who wouldn't mind me saying that because he is a retired accountant.
Perfect.
There's certainly that. Engineering, not anymore. We have done in the past, and in fact, the previous chair that I mentioned before, he was certainly of an engineering mindset and was involved in property in his professional career.
Okay. So, look, having said that, that kind of gives us a little bit of a feel about what the Strata Committee has been like over this period of time. And I think Zinc was constructed as a building in 2005. So it might not have gone through the process of having to do all the remedial works that, some other apartment buildings have had to have done in recent years yet. But let's jump over and just one other question. What do you think would be the split of owner investors versus owner occupiers at
We're about 50-50 at the moment.
Mhm.
Yeah, historically it's been as 60-40 was the peak in terms of owners being the dominant force.
Yeah.
Certainly majority, should I say, rather than dominant force. And then just to not to correct you, Brent, but we've had our fair share of building issues as well.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll cover off on that as well and see how that
Okay.
impacts the electrification agenda as well. So let's start with energy efficiency. Let's roll back to 2010. And can you just walk me through? This is Zinc, maybe back in the days where the common areas might have been consuming over 160 kilowatt hours a day. Can you just talk a little bit through first the energy efficiency projects that you might have done in that early period?
Certainly. So there was some really, really simple things, which was just replacing the halogen downlights with LEDs, the first and most obvious thing. And then a couple of pieces where there's a variable speed drive for the water pump was put in place. Some of that was driven just by noise rather than the desire to do the right thing by the planet back then. And equally, there was some sensors put in the car park for the exhaust emissions extraction. So they were the really simple things that were done at the first level. Following on from that, there was some motion sensors that were put in the corridors, in the common area corridors. So they were the simple things that we did. And then we moved on to a couple of different pieces, and we didn't get them all in the right order. So we've learned some lessons along the way, but certainly we had some common area solar. We had two phases of that for different reasons. So that totaled about 25 kilowatts in the end, which was
just on that. So you went out first with the common area solar system that was a bit smaller, and then you expanded the size of it. Was that because of budget constraints at the time, or was it because, was it the committee might have been uncertain about maybe committing the extra funds to a bigger solar system? What was the thinking back then doing the smaller solar system
yeah,
first?
funnily enough, it wasn't funds at all. We had the funds committed. We'd actually penciled in those funds for a battery.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But there was just enough unanswered questions about what would happen, more about high demand items, such as the lift was a classic example that we just didn't have the answers for. And there was enough concerns that were raised that said, okay, let's pause on batteries. We'll get to that at some point. So let's put the additional solar on.
Yep.
Knowing that we were overspeccing, overutilizing, that's over generating, should I say?
Yep.
But that in the end, we'll get to a point of where we will make good use of that electricity that we solar generation that we just didn't know quite how at that point.
So you had like an 8 kilowatt solar system that maybe you would call a right-sized solar, and then you expanded that to a 25 kilowatt common area solar system that has been spilling a bit of extra feed into the grid, but effectively you've got the view of moving to the batteries later on and sucking that up and using it to run some of the common services into the evening when the sun's not shining. So, okay, so first of all, when Zinc did solar, one of the early retrofits of solar, it wasn't the proven technology it is today. I think we've just done this Electrified strata mapping project, and we think there's about 1,700 strata buildings in Sydney with solar now, out of about 50,000. But back in the day, where were we? 2016 for solar?
17, I think. Yep,
2017. Definitely an early adopter on that one. And then let's move on. At some point, you've started the process of putting in electricity monitoring devices on the common area services in the building. So let's just give people a bit of a view. You've got one lift at Zinc. You've got an underground car park. We've got
yes.
Yep, you've got the car park fan that's running on a CO sensor system now. And I assume you've got some other ventilation in the building as well?
Just for kitchens and bathrooms, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So the next thing was you don't have a building management system or a BMS that, like, say, high-rise buildings might have. So what role is electricity monitoring devices playing in the building at Zinc, and how many do you have?
Well, I guess the starting premise was, we didn't know what we didn't know, and then just throwing solar at things and having done some, baseline energy efficiency stuff, that there's things in the building that, I didn't even know were there. Clearly it's infrastructure, clearly it's important, but, unless you go around looking in rooms, you don't know where things are, what they do. So, so ultimately we started with one Watt-Watchers device.
Yep.
And then we just rotated that. Had to learn what such a thing was and how currents were measured and consumption was measured as well. So that was a bit entertaining. But yeah, we just rotated those through the major circuits. So within the building. So left them on for a period of time, enough to get some consumption patterns, to understand what the patterns were, what were the biggest users of electricity and when, and then also from all that we can build a picture about what we can do about some, what we can not do about others, and then what we can do to influence those patterns and make use of either further efficiency or solar generation, or ideally both.
Yep. So how many devices do you have? Just one device in at the moment?
We started with one, and then what I wanted to do was try and understand what the whole of the building was doing. Because obviously we couldn't get access to people's the individual apartments consumption patterns. So I started with a simple premise. It's like, well, surely there's a big pipe coming in that tells us that's where all the electricity comes from. So that's Nathan language. So in the end, so that meant a second device, which was just a bigger spec, bigger capacity, so that we could see what the total activity for the building was, with a view to saying, okay, well, once then we can see almost what the building's behaving like at a macro level.
Right. And So a couple of things that maybe the electricity monitoring installation might have helped with were one, planning for electric vehicle charging.
Certainly was, because
Yep.
understanding what happened when, and also it's led us down a path of well, what was the actual building's capacity? Because up until that point, I didn't know that buildings had a capacity. So I was learning as we went along as well, but with a view to making sure that we're getting prepared for questions that are going to get asked, and questions that we need to ask ourselves and our suppliers as well.
Right. So, look, another thing that electricity monitoring, if you're measuring that big fat pipe of everything coming in from the street, did that give you a bit of a picture in terms of like planning for later solar projects that might channel solar into the individual apartments in the building?
Absolutely, and then certainly with some of the work we're doing with from the grants from City of Sydney Smart Greener Apartments, it allowed us to get a third party view, someone who's far more knowledgeable than me. So Ethan Burns from Sustainability Now. So we'll be able to use that data and understand, what our profile looked like and what it could look like as well. So then what that meant from a consumption, generation, but also, cost and benefit to be realized as well.
Yeah. So it's giving you eyes on the ground of, where consumption's happening in the building, in apartments, in different common area circuits. And around 2017, um, uh, you started the process of doing an EV charging, an electric vehicle survey to see what people's intention might be in relation to buying electric vehicles. So, um, can you talk through that process from, you know, trying to get a finger on the pulse of electric vehicles, and which 2017 is quite early on as well, I will say, compared to where we are in 2024. And just talk about that area of introducing the concept of electric vehicles into a strata building.
Yes, I think part of the benefit from the survey was that it gave us it gave the residents known as a voice, which we can then choose to make use of for good, right? Whatever that good looked like, and it certainly gave people the opportunity to know that the questions were being asked, but also they were being heard as well. So we could use that information for our planning purposes, but also to add value to their lives, their property, or whatever their motivators were, whether that's financial, environmental, or even just being early adopters.
Right. So, when you first raised like electric vehicles in a strata committee meeting, did it catch everyone else off guard? Was it something that people hadn't really thought about? Did you have to do an education process around electric vehicles with the other committee members?
Yeah, a little bit. I think people were open-minded, but there was a general view that it was something that would happen at some point, but it's far too early to be doing anything just yet.
Hmm.
Which was where, and again, some of the key questions in the survey that I recall now was about the buying intentions for, X period of time or years in advance. So it might
Yeah.
be something that's like, okay, well, we're expecting to buy an electric vehicle in 5 to 6 years, and it was a good horizon that's made people comfortable with,
Hmm.
certainly from a committee point of view, and it didn't feel too imminent, it didn't feel too pioneering, and it was something that we could actually plan for.
So, do you think there's a benefit in just getting something out on the table like a number of years in advance before someone turns up to an AGM or an EGM asking for a large amount of money to do a project?
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Because even in the corporate world, you still have to have the water cooler discussions. You still have to float ideas. You have to get people comfortable with things because fundamentally, humans aren't that great with change,
yep.
but kind of love it at the same time. And then certainly, in the strata world, possibly even more so because it's by its nature, it's a lot more conservative. So absolute benefit in socializing those ideas and just making sure that we've, providing the right information, but also qualified information at the time.
Yeah. So what I think, a lot of our strata committees do have people that are working in like large corporates, and often they'll go along and they'll have to go through training sessions on organizational change management, OCM. It's probably got different different names over the years, but this idea of that's behind that in a large corporation, and you're working in a day job that's in one of those environments. I would actually say that it's probably a fairly similar process that you have to go through inside a strata building, starting with the strata committee, which might be, think of it like in the corporate world, it might be maybe it's a board of directors, or maybe it's just like a management team, and then you've got the employees in the corporate, and you've got to cascade down, these ideas, and sometimes you've got to capture ideas coming up from the employees. So is that something that you've sort of drawn a parallel with at Zinc? Is it similar to that corporate process for
Oh, look
change?
at that. Yeah, look, to a large extent, yes. I think certainly having, fact-based conversations and all the socialization that we've just spoken about, and developing a plan that's not just, someone's pet project, or that they're an advocate for. It's something that is, you can stand behind, that someone else has supported. They've built a business case for it, and then you say, look, yeah, I can be the champion for that. But here's the third-party external view that says
Right.
these are the options that are available to you. So you can certainly treat it like that if you think of it as a procurement process. I think the key difference between between a strata or an owners corporation and a corporate is that corporates usually have like at least a charter, a vision, a mission, a charter that
Hmm.
is guiding the behaviors and principles and objectives. Owners corporations, well, haven't well, certainly ours didn't. Let's put it that way. So I think that we didn't have the guiding principle, other than just alignment and doing the right thing and having some people that are interested in certain things. It was missing that driving principles.
So do you think it might be a little bit more like a bunch of shareholders that are looking to maximize their capital gain of their shares, as opposed to the management team and employee? Um, Instead of that analogy, it's probably more like a bunch of shareholders turning up to an annual shareholder
I
meeting.
think that's a good comparison, because it certainly speaks to the different motivators that different people have.
Yeah.
Yes, agree.
Okay. So we get to 2018, and uh, the Australian government does neighbours for apartment buildings. So it's a rating system that measures on 6 stars the energy and water of apartment buildings. And it's not mandatory like it is in commercial uh, buildings. But can you just talk us through where you started on neighbours? Because I'm guessing by this time you've already done a lot of energy efficiency. You've probably saved about 67% of your common area consumption. And then you're doing your first neighbours rating after you've already done that. So you're not really banking all the gains from that work you've done from 2010 up to 2018. But yeah, do you just want to tell us, and if you're happy to disclose your neighbours' ratings and what they were and what they moved to, um, yeah, go for it.
More than happy to do that. And I think, but the first thing is, where I started was, I don't know if it's sad or wonderful, but probably let's go with wonderful in this environment. I was the sort of person that walk around the CBD and just look up at the police signs in the commercial buildings and see ratings on there and go, why don't we have that for apartments and then houses and similar, even in the real estate world. And then obviously someone else has thought the same thing and extended it. So we got involved, the people that I got to know
Yep.
through the work we've done so far in the various schemes. But I was enthusiastic to share as much as I can and understand what other people are doing. So we just extend that group, but also understand like how much of where we were, what that line in the sand was, and then what that meant, how high the standards were, how much more we had to go,
Hmm.
and if getting more was a good thing. But it certainly was again another independent view of that. So we actually had 2 ratings done. The first one gave us, from an electricity efficiency perspective, it was 4.5 stars
Out of a possible 6.
out of a
Yep.
possible 6. Yes, indeed. And then a couple of years later, maybe 3 years later, then we got that rated again, and then hit the magic 6, which was very pleasing. And we were even more pleasing was, I think there's another building just up the road that just beat us. So not that it was a competition, but it's great to see that someone else is further along the line as well.
Right. Was that Maestro over at Forest Lodge, or?
I think it might have been, I
Right.
think it was, yeah.
Okay. So now you've done Neighbours when that came out, and probably just going into COVID, the EV charging started to become more of a thing. And perhaps by this time, you've actually got an electric vehicle in the building. So Zinc ends up um, installing an EV charging backbone, and you're using something called flat cables. So do you want to tell people about this? And maybe I'll try and share a screen and show a photo of it while you're
Yeah, happily.
riffing on that.
And I actually found out about flat cable from another strata group, that you were. In fact, I think it was your fault, Brent. Actually, I'm pretty confident it was your fault. I'm like, what's that?
Yep.
So for those that don't know, it's basically it's a cable that just runs around the outside of the car park, and which you can just attach many as many as you like. Electric vehicle charges to. There you go, pictured beautifully there. So it just
Okay.
looks like an old-fashioned speaker cable for those that are old enough to remember, and it just runs around the outside.
Yeah, my dad was a hi-fi um, person, and he had a lot of cables that looked like this. I'm not sure what kind of audio quality you get off one of these, but the idea is basically you've got this running past all the back of all the car spaces, and you can chop into it and add EV charge points as you want to. That's basically
That's
the crux of it,
that's
right?
exactly it. You could have 0 to start with, 0 EV charges, or you could have 1 for every space. You could have as many or as few as you like, but it's future-proofed for that.
Yeah, and look, here are a couple of photos. We can see a Tesla Generation 3 charge point. So, and that looks like a decent sized charging cable on that. How many of these charge points have you installed into the basement car park?
We've got 10 of those, which are just evenly spread throughout the car park. The car park's got 30 spaces in. The cable, you're right, it is a decent length. It's 7.3 meters. So what that means in practical terms is that just about every space has got access to two chargers.
Right.
So, and again, mentioned in that future-proofing piece again, the logic was it's going to be a long time before we needed to put more of the chargers in, but they're relatively low cost, and when we do, we can put in 1 per space if we wanted to go that far.
So at the moment, what you've done is you don't have a concept of an individual car space owning a particular charger. You've actually got chargers that can be shared by 2 or 3 nearby spaces. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And
Yep.
there's a simple billing system behind it. The owners' corporation set the rate. There's just one tariff that we can set at this stage. We're hoping for it to be more dynamic in the future, so we can take advantage of the solar in terms of free charging, because that'd be a great incentive. But for now, it's a user pays. So if you've got a Tesla, you plug it in, and then that builds the Tesla account. If it's a non-Tesla, you just basically one tap of your app on your phone away. You pay what you use. At the time, we just made a simple decision. We decided we were going to charge the shoulder, what we would our shoulder rate for the building. And then what happens there is, so that money goes to, in this case, Tesla doing the billing. There's many other options out there now, but this was a little earlier in the piece. So Tesla does the administration for us. Tesla gets the money from the user and then reimburses the owner's corporation back all of that amount, apart from 1 cent per kilowatt as a notional administration fee. And they do that on a quarterly basis.
And also on the screen here, people would be able to see some Wi-Fi. So you've got Wi-Fi throughout the car park area, and the charge points talk to the cloud via the Wi-Fi system.
Correct.
And also, if you've got a car that wants to get a software update into the vehicle, it can pull down the update to the software from the Wi-Fi system. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And and the chargers, they're a mid tier in terms of pace for those that are interested. Most people don't operate like in petrol world in full charges, but essentially, if you did go from wanting to go from close to zero to a full charge, you'd easily do that in, say, 4 or 5 hours.
Okay. So now you've got EV. We'll put a tick that you've got EV charging covered, and you've got a basic load management system in there as well, and then you decide to turn your attention back to solar, and by this stage you've heard about Allume Energy SolShare. So this is a startup company from Melbourne that came out of Melbourne University. Decided to create the world's first solar sharing system that allows solar from one system to be shared equitably into multiple apartments in the building. And they're now exporting that to the US and to Europe as well. And so there's this homegrown Aussie system that's developed. Can you talk me through your experience of moving to what we'll call, do you call this stage 2 solar into apartments, or?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's certainly the solution that we were crying out for. What you can see on the screen there now is it's kind of 3/4 of the building, and that is all of the solar that is shared amongst the apartments.
So how many kilowatts do we have in? You had 25 for the common area.
Yeah, and there's 75 there.
Right. So that rounds it out. You've got 100 kilowatts of solar on an apartment building roof. And can you just talk us through the design of the Allume SolShare? How many of these devices did you need for 45 apartments?
So we needed 3. So each of the devices, which is just a big white box on the wall. So we had 3 big white boxes, and they cater for 15 apartments each. So that's just a hardware limitation. And then, so what that does means that those boxes can just constantly monitor the supply of solar and then demand for the apartments that are assigned to them. Then through the period, which is a month, then each apartment will get its designated allocation of solar.
Right. Now, have you gone to the point of setting this up so that it tries to mirror unit entitlements, or?
Is exactly what we did. Right. One of the biggest issues which we foresaw and we'd heard about in the rest of the strata community was about how to be equitable. And then the eureka moment was when I sort of realized that all we had to do was share the solar in line with units of entitlement, because by virtue of being in a strata community, we're all used to paying levies. So whether we knew it or not, but levies were calculated in a certain way. So that's exactly what we did, and we used it, and it was made the approval process very easy, actually, in the end, from a fairness perspective, because that's what a lot of people struggle with. So what we did, and I might be stealing a further question from you, but so what we did was as we went through the quotes, we understood the dollars that were involved. We agreed that we were going to propose it as a special levy, but that cost would be shared in line with the units of entitlement, and so would the solar. So
Right.
it took away multiple barriers to say no, or questions to be answered right at the outset.
So how did you end up paying? Because this would have been a lot more expensive than your first solar system, but you've got the runs on the board. People now have trust that, solar delivers a return. So how do you end up paying for this stage two solar that feeds into the apartments? Is it do you have to go to special levy? Is it a capital works fund? Do you take out a loan? How do you go about it?
Look, it was a special levy, but what we did do is we had sufficient funds to be able to pay outright
Hmm.
um, for the hardware and the installation, and then we proposed and agreed at a general meeting that we'd recover that amount over 4 quarters, so we could spread the cost of that special levy throughout a year, knowing that it was go through the process and it was secured funding.
Right. And so what role did the bean counter that you had on the strata committee have in communicating this to the rest of the owners and in particular owner investors? I'm guessing that there's a process where um, did you call like a Zoom meeting of everyone in the building and talk them through it, or?
We did. We did. I mean, a lot of the work with with our retired accountant was done in advance, and
Hmm.
sort of getting to that level of understanding and comfort and problem solving. But certainly, when we did get to a general meeting stage, we had the business case done again, as we'd done with some of the other pieces, and that was by a third party, and that was presented. We had that person present to
Yep.
to present their findings, present the options, and then say, look, this is a preferred option for all these reasons. And then certainly our bean counter friend was quite vocal about the process, but
Hmm.
positively so, because it actually worked through it, understood it, and we'd all gone at a pace that we could understand and sustain.
Yep.
And I think the other thing that we'd done was share that business case material in advance
Right.
with the owners corporation.
So
Um,
with every owner.
yep,
Yep.
absolutely. And there was a long version, and there was a short matrix version as well,
Hmm.
which said, look, these are the options, cost benefit analysis. Um, Here's some recommendations. But obviously, ultimately, owners corporation, it's up to you.
Okay, so it goes out for a vote, and are you happy to divulge like how close the vote was on going ahead with a project like this?
Absolutely. There was a slightly brave approach where we decided to put the vote for the EV charging infrastructure and the apartment sharing for solar, or the Allume equipment and panels. We did that on the same general meeting,
Right.
which was either foolish or brave, depending on your perspective.
You,
We
you you could say downright suicidal in some strata schemes.
well, but we had and unfortunately favours the brave sometimes. But we'd
Yep.
also, for all the things we've spoken about, we were reasonably confident, but you never know until you know. But but in the end, there's some good discussions and
Hmm.
lots of good questions, and we've had more people turn up to that general meeting than I've seen at any other meeting we've ever had, because
Right.
it's a fairly quiet sort of quiet in terms of attendance, a lot of meetings.
Yep.
But ultimately, both motions were passed unanimously.
Okay, that's incredible. So, look, hats off to everyone on this strata committee that's gone the distance, because it really is going the distance to be able to sustain. We've just spoken through like a raft of projects that have happened over maybe a decade, and look, by this stage, I sort of feel that Zinc is starting to get publicity, which hopefully is starting to reflect in a property valuation uplift into the individual apartments in the building. So when you were pitching the Allume Energy Sol Share, the solar sharing into the apartments, did people start to talk about property valuation uplift as well as payback?
They weren't so much talking about it, but there was a bit more consciousness of it,
Hmm.
I think. And I think it was around about that time, you'll be able to correct me, where there was some of the bigger real estate groups were starting to talk about dollars that value that could be added
Yep.
for these things. So I did take the opportunity to sort of showcase that somewhat. So and it was also there was some significant price rises going on at that time as well.
Yeah. So
So people were beginning to be a little bit more aware of both sides of the coin, I think.
yeah, so we've got COVID, we've got property values going up in the COVID lockdown period, and then Domain comes out with their study in 2022 that says um, apartments with energy features could have up to a 12.7% valuation uplift, or maybe $76,000 per apartment. So you've got actually property valuation going up because of COVID, and then you've got this extra accelerant from a couple of the real estate companies starting to measure this. Um, the question that comes to my mind right now is, well, the first thing is, um, what's the largest project that you've done at the Zinc building which is not a sustainability or electrification or decarbonisation project? Like, for us that live in mere mortal apartment buildings, sometimes we've got to recarpet the foyers, paint the outside of the building, you know, fix the garden, things like that. What's the biggest project that you've done in this period of time that's like not an electrification project?
We had the joy of having a fire order placed on us by the city of Sydney. And there's a whole story behind that, but best of everyone had tried to do the right thing over the years and self-certified it, private certifiers, came back to bite us. So that was by far and away the biggest project, bigger than
Yeah.
anything else combined in terms of cost and effort, and certainly no at least apparent immediate reward. Obviously, very important, but
Yeah.
there wasn't much immediate satisfaction that went with it. That's for sure.
Okay. So, did you have to go special levy on the fire compliance?
We did. So the timing was a little awkward,
Okay. Um,
but what it did do, it also gave an opportunity to turn the conversation around to where we can say, we have to do this for all of these reasons, and here's our due diligence, etc. But for these other initiatives that we're doing, there is a return on your investment. So I deliberately tried to steer the conversation away from just pure payback to return on investment. As soon as you do that, and you can mention a percentage,
yep.
and then it's like, okay, well, if that was your superannuation, would you be happy? Absolutely delighted. Then it became, slightly easier.
Right. Okay. So now Zinc's getting on top of compliance. Um, just another question, like it's you know, you've had companies coming in. Well, you've had City of Sydney, Sustainability Now, Sydney Solar Group, Watt Watchers, Car Chargers, Tesla, Allume Energy. Um, do you actually have? You don't have a building manager at Zinc. Did you ever think of having like a building manager, or the economics just wouldn't work in a block with 45 apartments?
I certainly thought about it, and we did discuss it briefly, but the economics wouldn't stack up. And then also as a committee, we've worked pretty hard and developed quite a good understanding in its various iterations over the years about how we'd like to run the building.
Yep.
And then even if the economics did stack up, I think it would be, with the best will in the world for a building that size, would be hard pushed to get value
Yep.
out of a building manager.
Okay, so you've got all these contractors coming to the building continually, fire compliance, LED lighting, everyone. And so do you rotate the responsibility of people on the committee for actually physically letting these contractors into the building?
Well, look, I think it's fair to say there was two of us that were more active in that space
Hmm.
than others for a whole bunch of different reasons.
Yep.
But also, luckily, contractors generally like to start early, so it means you
Right.
can sort of see them before work or whatever it might be. So it generally worked out fairly easily, and I had a series of a series of lock boxes and access codes and such like, and then we had some people that we'll work with repeatedly. The three different phases of solar was the same solar company that did that for us,
Yep.
as an example.
Yep. So yeah, great work by Dave at Sydney Solar Group. Um, so uh, let's just try and cover off. Now, you've had government incentives on the way. So let's just we'll just try for a quick fire through these. So you've had City of Sydney Smart Green Apartments funded reports. Watt Watchers, did you get a federal subsidy on the Watt Watchers device when that went in? Not sure.
Not from memory. Not from memory.
Okay.
No, it was relatively inexpensive, I think, at the time. So it was an easy decision to make.
Okay. Then solar, you've gotten the federal government small scale technology certificate rebates on each of those. You haven't crossed over 100 kilowatts yet. What other uh, government incentives have you tried for, or did you get the New South Wales Energy Savings Scheme on the LED lighting upgrade?
We did actually. Yes, as we upgraded the lights in the
That's
car park. Yes, we did.
car park. Okay, you picked up a New South Wales subsidy. You were too early. You got your EV charging backbone in too soon for the New South Wales government EV charging grants. You were already ahead of the game on that one. Um, what else have you looked at? Have you looked at other environmental things like recycling, composting, e-waste, coffee pods, anything along those lines?
So the main one worth noting is the pilot scheme that the City of Sydney have been running for feels like a couple of years now for their food waste
Yep.
recycling.
Yep.
So that's been good. That's been judging at the amount of how full the bin is,
Hmm.
and gets collected twice a week. That's been a success. I'm sure it's only a drop in the ocean from the potential, but nonetheless, it has been a success. As far as other things go, no, just a standard recycling scheme. There's nothing else special. I'd love to do more, but there's
Yep.
certain limitations, of course.
Okay. And now, other service providers, how much assistance did you actually get from strata management companies, strata lawyers on the way through? And do you have someone on the committee that can actually draft bylaws for these things internally, or do you have to go to a strata lawyer to draft the bylaws?
So the drafting of the bylaws has always been via the strata managers. So we
Yep.
haven't engaged anyone externally, and we've had a general principle of absolutely doing the right thing, but keeping things as simple
Yep.
as they possibly can be. But we do have a lawyer as part of the committee, so it's
Hmm.
been really helpful more from a reviewing perspective
Right.
than a writing perspective. So that makes and it's a commercial lawyer as well, so it's got a really pragmatic eye on things.
Right. Okay. So it looks like you've got another blessing on the strata committee there, because some strata buildings, particularly those that have English as second language, people on the committee, um, you're sometimes running into a big hurdle in being able to review these sort of things in house. Do you have you had to cater for English as a second language, and do translations of anything in at Zinc?
Well, we haven't catered for it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have done, by the way. But
Right.
we're not. And it's a fair question in today's environment, and it's not something that we've had any call outs for us to do or assist with. But equally, I mean, I'll take that as an action that we should ask the question, right,
Yeah.
in the appropriate way.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, like we've just had a strata building in North Sydney ask whether they can have a Chinese translator on a call to talk through a sustainability report. So, that's another thing that might come up in the future. So, look, okay, I think we've covered like a lot of the great work that's gone on at Zinc, and what we want to do is just have a little chat about, where do you go to from here? And, we'll do that maybe for the next 10 minutes. And then if people want to put a few questions in the chat, we'll have a look at a couple of those and then wind things up. So now you've got Zinc, one of the most electrified, decarbonised, sustainable apartment buildings in Australia. You're feeding a bit too much solar into the grid. So batteries, virtual power plants, vehicle to grid, energy retailers that allow wholesale market rates. What else is in the future at Zinc, and where do you see Zinc going in the next decade?
Well, I think there were two things, and it's going to be fairly simple. We think we've got it'll be heat pumps to replace the hot water system, its central hot water system.
Yep.
That is getting towards end of life. It's not quite, but it's getting towards it. So we've started planning for that replacement, and there's a couple of logistical things to work through and constraints. But nonetheless, we started doing that process. But even a couple of years ago, we just noted in one of the committee meetings that the gas when it comes the time to replace,
Yep.
it will be electric. So
Right.
so heat pumps will be the next logical piece.
Yep.
That we'll go to, and then following that, certainly at a top level, we've got enough solar generation in the building to take the building just about completely off the grid.
Yep.
Obviously, we won't, because there's going to be fluctuations, and we can't anyway. But we've got enough solar there. So the next piece will be, after the heat pumps, will be to work out what that battery solution looks like.
Yep.
How we share it, how we fund it, whether we retail it effectively to ourselves. There's an ongoing recovery and replacement program. All these thoughts, which are pretty exciting, as we can do that. How and whether we can use the Allume software to distribute that. Lots of questions to answer that I don't know all the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, if there's any excess, or if there's a big time gap between now and that occurring, then maybe we might sort of retail, wholesale it, spot market stuff between now and then.
Okay, so yours is not a simple conversion for heat pump like we've seen the Serenity building at Chatswood. Brian Peck, put in the heat pump solution powered by 30 kilowatts of common area solar. He's got hot water costs down to about $180 per apartment per year, and I think that's something that could be possible at Zinc in the future as well. But you've got some more capital costs, like you don't have the best ventilation set up for heat pumps. Is that correct? You need a bit more.
Yeah, where the current hot water system is limited. However, we do have some provision in the car park,
Yep.
which we think can work well. We know it's worked well in other buildings.
Yep.
So which we've got borderline, we've pretty much set aside for the possibility for using that space as and when required, and the heat pump solution is available to us, which hopefully will be in the next couple of years.
Okay, so that'll be exciting. So that's the degasification, and when we talk about electrify everything, the goal is to get apartment buildings completely off gas. In your own internal apartment, have you still got a gas cooktop, or?
Sadly, I have. I've got to admit to it. I have.
Right.
But it will get replaced literally in the next few months.
Yep.
So that will go. The good news is the electricity bill on average, mine is 2-bedroom apartment is down to $58. I think is a month is
Wow.
the 2-year average.
Yep.
So pretty. And I don't live in the dark. I promise you. It's just using things at the right time. So, but there's plenty of apartments that are already within the building that are replacing gas with electric stovetops.
Right. Okay. So the future looks like maybe heat pumps as the next, batteries, And if you've got any feed-in left after that, but you might actually have more electric vehicles in the building at that time as well. So,
Certainly hope
um,
so.
and we know that Sanjay from Car Chargers is on looking at the vehicle to grid side as well. So it'd be interesting if you continue on and get a vehicle to grid solution or a vehicle to apartment solution at Zinc at some point. So um, I think I've gotten to the end of the questions I wanted to ask here. So what I might do is let's just jump over into the chat and see if there are a couple of questions. So okay, Steph was asking for the name of the building. It's Zinc, 30 to 44 Garden Street, Alexandria. Um, uh, okay. A question here from Jean is, how did you find out the building's capacity and how much did it cost you to find that out?
Well, I found it out because I kept asking non-electrical engineering questions, and
Yep.
in the end, I got lots of things I didn't understand. But I asked for a graph that
Mm.
showed our average consumption over a 24-hour period, and I wanted to see a line at the top which said this is the maximum. And as soon as I asked for that, someone was able to do it really easily,
Okay.
which
Right.
said to me we had plenty of capacity,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
And actually, with buildings like built 2000 in the noughties like yours, it's not going to be as big a problem as the 60s and 70s red brick walk-ups. Next question I think I can answer is, how much did the neighbours rating cost? I think you can say thanks to the City of Sydney for funding those. How do you incentivize users to unplug when they're done so they aren't using hogging the in-use charges? Okay, I think Leon's question here is assuming that you've got visitor car parking, but in Zinc, you don't actually have any shared visitor car parking spaces. All the charge points are only for individual car spaces, right?
Oh no, we've provisioned for all. We've got full visitor spaces and
Okay,
sorry, 26, I think, resident spaces.
okay,
So, and strangely, the visitor spaces are spread out. So every space has got equal access to chargers.
right, okay. So, but you don't have a booking system or bollards on the
No, I mean, we've got, given that each space has got access to two chargers, it's not a problem that we've had to face yet and won't do for a long period of time.
Yep,
And the logic being that as and when it does become a problem, we just put more chargers in
yep, okay.
because they're relatively inexpensive.
Are the individual charges fast or slow charges? Well, I'd say level 2 is sort of in the middle. Level 2 Tesla Gen
Yeah.
3.
Faster than you need, especially,
Yeah.
and you certainly get used to it when you've got an electric vehicle.
Question here, how do you achieve full equitability with Allume Soul Share? I think we covered that in terms of the unit entitlements being used to apportion the solar.
I'd
Um,
say to that is that we do monitor it as well, and we
yep,
do sort of reconcile the actual allocation versus the versus what people paid for,
yep.
and it does line up, by the way. So we give people that comfort.
And with Allume Soul Share, how's the owner who does not use her share credited, or is she? I think I'll just maybe I'll just say everyone still has the right to choose their own energy retailer. So we're not in an embedded electrical network situation here. And so people can actually choose the tariff which best suits their needs, whether they're someone that's going to be at home during the day and have more consumption during the day, or out at the office or out at uh, school or something like that during the day. So uh, I think the best way to describe this is it's fair and equitable at the solar generation and distribution level, but it's not necessarily the same financial benefit for everyone depending on which energy retailer they choose to be with. So, what's the cost of the EV flat cable backbone infrastructure? And what's the cost of the individual EV charger when added to the system later from Juka?
Well, the individual charges, that's the easy bit to answer because
Yep.
I think they're about $800 even at the moment. And
Yep.
there's obviously a lot more options there. The flat cable solution varies wildly according to, no, I wouldn't say wildly, it varies according to the building specifics. Ours was relatively inexpensive. So it came out to about $1,000 a space to pay for
Okay.
the infrastructure.
And what's been your impact on building insurance after installing both solar and EV charging?
We've seen no negative impact on building insurance.
Okay. Um, Eva was asking, is solar surplus sellable to the building rather than back to the grid? Or is this a future project for Allume Energy solar share? Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's probably a future project, really. It's as we spoke about, potentially somewhere between batteries, um, trading or selling it or giving back at a gross level.
so we had a little conversation about there's an energy retailer called Local Volts now. And if people on both sides, like for example, if the common area was on that energy retailer and the individual apartments were also on that energy retailer, you could theoretically have the possibility to sell excess solar from the common areas back into individual apartments, not physically, but virtually. So. Charlie's saying, did you require any electrical upgrades to increase the capacity of the building and allow for EV chargers, induction cooktops, etc.?
No, the only thing we've done is provided some extra sort of safety measures. So there's a grid protection system because of the size of the solar for the apartments, and then a few other smaller devices that essentially just protect the building. And there's some load management software for the EVs. But in terms of significant upgrades that you hear, horror stories about, absolutely not.
iPhone's asking, what's the ongoing solar maintenance like?
Well,
Annual, yeah.
we have them cleaned and checked. The electrical connection is checked once every couple of years, so negligible.
Okay. Charlie is asking, have you looked into what size batteries would be required?
Yeah, I did. And it's more about the amount of batteries, I think, rather than what size. So it's getting to commercial scale.
Yep.
So I think it would be just probably having your Tesla Powerwalls or equivalent probably wouldn't cut it. I think you'd need to go into that sort of next level up, something that could be,
Ah,
more akin to commercial.
yeah, actually, there is a strata building out at Schofield Gardens, which has got one room with 24 Tesla Powerwalls
Ah, okay. Oh,
in it.
we need to talk more then.
Yeah. So, and what I didn't realize is you can actually domino them, like put three of them deep against the wall without
Yeah,
them
yeah.
overheating. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Um,
we'll talk more.
okay. um, uh, okay. Chloe is saying, what about charging infrastructure for e-bikes and e-scooters? Have you thought about this?
No is the quick answer. I think I suggest we will do.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that many coming in and out of the building. Doesn't mean it's not occurring. But certainly we probably should. The preference would be that we'd have a station in the car park appropriately secure so we can manage it
Yeah.
accordingly.
I saw a good one up at the Channel 9 Microsoft building in North Sydney. Omigo had put in a e-bike, e-mobility station, and that gets the charging of the e-bike batteries out of the apartments, which is a bit dangerous as well. So, Piera, if you've got solar roof panels, why do you need heat pumps? Doesn't solar provide a system for hot water? I think we can just knock this one out. We'll just say currently you've got gas hot water. To make the benefit of solar, you need to switch to either electric storage or electric heat pumps in the future. Mavis, where were all your electricity meters for each apartment?
There's two banks of meters at one end of the building. There's one on the ground floor, which is about half the building's worth, and there's one on level 3, which is the other half of the building.
Right. Okay.
So
So you've got.
they're in a vertical rise, basically.
Okay. Okay. So um, Ross is saying our building's midway through the EV charging backbone installation. We're finding that EV installers are reluctant to quote for flat cabling, stating that it's more expensive than cable trays. What are your thoughts on that? I think probably the answer to that, there was a second company that was doing the flat cable, apart from car chargers, but I think they've actually wound up. So I think it's just more lack of people that are importing it into the country at this point. Tanya's saying, did you switch all the apartments over to solar via Allume in one go, or did you move lots over when they were ready, in a scheduled switch over?
They all moved over in one go. The only thing that is, and the apartments didn't have to do anything for that to occur. The only thing they needed to do was to benefit from feed-in tariffs on their own, on their own arrangement with the retailers, was to get a smart meter fitted. So if they've got a smart meter fitted, then they'll get the benefit, small though it is, of the feed-in tariffs for the excess that they are not using. So they get their allocation, they'll use it, and they'll get benefit from the excess. If they haven't got a smart meter, then they won't get that feed-in tariff benefit.
Okay. Dean saying, what do you use to monitor your capacity usage? Well, that would be the Wattwatchers devices. Great session. Mamoon says, great session. We'll be sharing the video recording. Yes, the plan is to share it up on YouTube. Jean saying, it seems you have 30 out of 45 who have Allume solar on the roof. Is there room for enough? No, you've got enough. You've got enough solar for all 45 on the roof at the moment.
So 45, the 30 was just for the car spaces because that's all we've got.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think we need to, iPhone's saying, do you think we need to consider other aspects to make apartment blocks climate resilient? Where should you start? So it's a tough one.
Yes is the quick answer, and the standard answer is insulation. As the first and easiest thing to do. So it's the least sexy, but it's the biggest difference you could make.
You're a fairly young building, so replacing all the windows with double glazed is like we're talking 15, 20 years away. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we're almost at the end here. Chloe's saying, have shared vehicle solutions been considered? Aria in Brisbane has 5 shared Teslas has a shared EV car share vehicle that's only this. I think this is the question: have you thought about an EV car share that's dedicated to just people that live in Zinc?
We did think about it very briefly, but ultimately did nothing with that.
Right.
There wasn't enough at the time. There wasn't enough demand, but maybe we should go back and see if that's something that might be of interest.
Yeah, look, I know that you got a few options coming onto the scene. I think probably Omigo does a shared Tesla in that building in North Sydney. You've got Carbar and even Origin Energy moving into this this space of shared electric vehicles. So okay, so I think we've gotten to the end of the questions here, Nathan. So I'd just like to do a shout out first to um, the team that worked really hard to put together Climate Week Sydney. The whole thing was brought together in the last 10 weeks, and they've gotten up over 100 events this week. So this was just day one of the program. Go back to the event page, find all the other things that might be not just virtual meetings, but like in-person events, and sign up for those. And And we'd just like to thank everyone for joining today. And I'll just thank one more time Nathan Hage from Zinc Apartment Buildings for showing us how to be a true sustainability champion in strata.
Our pleasure. Thanks all.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. See ya.
Bye now.